First, though, meeting today in a legislative committee. This is the State Assembly's Committee on Governmental Operations, Accountability, and Transparency. They hauled in Jill Underly. Now, this was an informational meeting, but they did request that Underly show up to explain how exactly DPI did not violate open meetings law with its super secret water park resort getaway, at which they unilaterally changed students' standards on the statewide forward exam test that lowered said standards to make it look like Wisconsin's K-12 students were doing a lot better than they were. They spent $368,000 in taxpayer money that was just completely unknown. Nobody knew about this until the Dairyland Sentinel, following a year of obstruction and delays in getting open records to the Dairyland Sentinel, broke the story a few months ago. It became a huge scandal. And now our friends at the Institute for Reforming Government have filed an action against the DPI, alleging that this was a violation of Wisconsin's open meetings law. So Jill Underly, the state superintendent, the head of the Department of Public Instruction, or DPI, well, she's just unavailable for the hearing today. You might remember the last time she was called before the state legislature, she coincidentally had to be out of the state to accept an award by her grade school. Her grade school in Ohio was giving her a Distinguished Alum Award, so she couldn't show up to testify on I believe it was the sex abuse. There are so many scandals with respect to DPI and public schools in Wisconsin. It's difficult to keep track of them. This is an accountability scandal. So she sent a functionary by the name of Andrew Hoyer Booth. He is the legislative liaison for the Department of Public Instruction. And tell me if this guy does not sound like the ultimate government bureaucrat.
We want to ensure elected officials have a solid understanding of how agency operations and procedures support our mission to advance equitable, transformative, and sustainable educational experience.
Okay. My producer has already fallen asleep. Doug, wake up, buddy. Wake up. We need to go to commercial break in a second. I swear, Jill Underly sent Andrew Hoyer Booth specifically because he is so boring. His cadence is so boring. He makes Ben Stein sound like Sam Kinison. He was, even in the calming, dulcet monotone of Andrew Hoyer Booth, shockingly defiant. Listen to what he says, if you can get through to the good stuff.
We want to ensure elected officials have a solid understanding of how agency operations and procedures support our mission to advance equitable, transformative, and sustainable educational experience that develop learners, schools, libraries, and communities in Wisconsin. Unfortunately, this committee's desire to discuss the standard setting and benchmarking process for the forward exam is a distraction from that mission and is repetitive to numerous prior legislative hearings on the same topic.
Now, you might have slipped into a coma halfway through that 35-second soundbite, but what Mr. Hoyer Booth was saying is we are far too busy educating children to have to come before the legislature and answer your questions. He's the legislative freaking liaison. It is his job to work with the legislature. But because this committee, just how dare they want to get to the bottom of why it is DPI told absolutely nobody and made everybody involved in this water park retreat sign a non-disclosure agreement. And just in case you forgot, this was in June of 2024. You have 88 different bureaucrats. I would love to see Andrew Hoyer Booth at this Chula Vista Resort meeting. You know, this guy has got the big white slab of sunscreen on his nose. He's got like the sleeveless T-shirt, and he's wearing socks with sandals as he's getting his chair ready next to the lazy river. He, honest to goodness, said, We're far too busy educating kids, poorly, I might add. That just blows me away. You've got to get through the dull Tony Evers-esque cadence. But that was a real slap in the face, and that came right at the beginning of his prepared remarks at the beginning of this hearing this afternoon. So DPI gets together 88 different bureaucrats. They somehow spend $368,000 at the Chula Vista Resort, which is some feat because they were probably getting the government hotel rate, which is significantly cheaper than what the Chula Vista would normally be charging. Now, I know the Chula Vista has an all-inclusive option where you can get food and drinks included. You get full water park amenities. I'm taking a wild guess. At least some of these bureaucrats were getting massages and other things. What they were there to do was to change how the forward exam measures proficiency, measures whether someone is at grade level in terms of math or English language arts skills. What they did was lower those standards. For example, the forward exam, immediately after the changes were made, unilaterally, even Tony Evers, even Democrat Evers, said he would not have changed the test scores like this. Immediately after those scores were changed, it showed that fourth graders in Wisconsin, 52% of them were proficient in English, 52%. It was fake. The national testing standards, the NAEP, came out a short time later and found that just 33% of Wisconsin's fourth graders were actually proficient in English language arts. The forward exam was either made to be easier or what's known as the cut scores were made to essentially juice the numbers so it looked like more students were proficient or at grade level when they actually weren't. Now, as I said, the Institute for Reforming Government just filed an action in Adams County Circuit Court. The Chula Vista is located in Adams County. I believe the rest of the Dells, parts of the Dells are in Adams County, parts of the Dells are in, Sauk County? This is part in Adams County. So they filed an action yesterday in order to, we actually had the exclusive before they even filed the suit, to basically hold that they violated the open meetings law because the meeting here, which was clearly public business, was not properly noticed. There was no public notice like, hey, we're going to make this massive change that's going to impact every single kid in public education in the state of Wisconsin. And we think the public should be at least aware that this is going on. There were no meeting notes. There were no notes whatsoever. There were no documents. Everybody involved had to sign an NDA. So what was Mr. Hoyer Booth's excuse for this? Well, we contracted with a private company, so they weren't subject to the open meetings law, and we needed to have those NDAs because the test questions that the kids would be taking are so super secret.
The work in June of 2024 to establish cut scores was part of the DPI's contract with DRC. DRC is an external vendor and private company, not a governmental body subject to Wisconsin's open meeting laws.
Yeah, but all of the people who were public employees who are working in conjunction with DPI, they absolutely are subject to the open meetings law.
It was DRC's responsibility to complete the work outlined in its contract with the department. As such, DRC hosted the convening in the Wisconsin Dells in the summer of 2024 to set standards and establish cut scores for the forward exam. The DPI provided consultation and support to this external vendor in all areas of the contract when requested. It's important to remember that educators participating in the standard setting meeting were reviewing confidential proprietary test questions. These are questions that can appear on future state assessments in classrooms all across the state. DRC incorporated best practices to protect the credibility of future assessment results and safeguard taxpayer expenses.
What he's saying there, again, you got to get past the boring Ben Stein-esque cadence here. But what he's saying is that we needed to have these people sign NDAs, not because we knew that we were frittering away hundreds of thousands of dollars in taxpayer money on ourselves to treat ourselves to a luxurious Chula Vista weekend getaway, but because the kids might figure out what some of the new questions are on the Wisconsin Forward exam. So we have to have these people, because there might be some second grader somewhere who would check out the meeting notes of this meeting and figure out that they're going to ask me, is 2 + 2 4 or 5 on the upcoming Forward exam? Seriously, that is their story, and apparently they're sticking to it. That these are proprietary test questions, and if they were to fall into the wrong hands, like some miscreant 7th grader, well then, the entire thing would be ruined. When I say this guy was shockingly defiant, I mean he was shockingly defiant. DPI absolutely does not believe that you as a taxpayer, you as the parent of kids who are taking this rigged exam, have any right to know exactly what they were spending your money on and exactly how they decided to unilaterally change the scores. Again, not to make the test more rigorous, but rather to make it look like Wisconsin school children were doing a lot better than they were. That was the entire point of this meeting. That's why they are so jealously guarding all of the secrets that were apparently going on here. It's not how many crab legs Jill Underly was able to squeeze into her mouth at the all-inclusive resort while she was going down the lazy river. It's because they don't want you to know that the entire purpose of this was to make it seem like Wisconsin's kids were doing better when they weren't. This is the entirety of Jill Underly's tenure at DPI summed up in a nutshell. Remember, she unilaterally changed years ago how district and school report cards were doing so that far more schools were given passing grades. In fact, there was one year, I believe it was 2 years ago, that not a single school or school district got a failing grade. It was not a single school district, even MPS. National standards show MPS is dead last in the nation in educating black students, according to the NAEP standards, according to those scores. But it's still got a passing grade by Jill Underly. It's to make MPS look better, to make it look like Underly and DPI are doing a better job than they actually were.